So just to start, can I have you say your name for me, please?
Yep, Andy Ward.
And I just want to ask, how often have you had a concussion?
I would say I've probably had 2, possibly 3 concussions over my playing time, which is 10, 15 years, and then a bit of junior time.
Yeah. And then how did you almost tell that you had them in a way? Was it someone had to tell you, or did something just feel off almost straight away?
One of them I got knocked out, so generally that kind of goes hand in hand. And then the other ones, you just get the blow to the head and you generally know whether it's instant or a bit later on, you kind of get the symptoms there. They start dizzy, a bit of headache, nauseous, etc. You know within yourself, don't you, when you're not feeling right.
And then with that, obviously the team doctors are looking out for you a lot, trying to make sure if they think you might have one, they're telling you, get off now, basically. Yep. How important is that for you as a player to know you have that security of them watching everything and being there for you if they know you need it?
Very important, because obviously when you're playing a team sport, you don't want to let your teammates down. So you've always got that get up and go mentality, and then obviously you don't necessarily notice yourself if you're not quite moving as quickly, as freely, you're not as accurate in your moves and stuff. So you've always got someone watching out. They know how you would normally be moving and playing, and then they can make that assessment based on what they see, because your head's always, you're so involved in the game, aren't you? You're easily distracted and trying to carry on.
And then I've really enjoyed asking this question because it's a different answer each time. Which one for you would you say get concussions the most, the backs or the forwards?
Being a back, I'm going to say backs. You're going to want a reason, aren't you?
If possible. Or what do you think leads to the backs getting the concussions the most?
I think the forwards, you're working in generally a much more confined space. The pace is lower. Yes, generally the mass is higher, but out in the backs, generally you got different angles, different lines, more pace involved. So the chances of putting your head on the wrong side of someone and getting a knee or something like that is probably higher. Yeah. But obviously the forwards will say opposite.
And then when you were returning from your concussions, did you almost try and go quickly back to rugby, or was it a bit more of a take it step by step to be safe and make sure there was no backlash, almost a long-lasting effect? Yeah,
you've got to be careful. Like you say, everyone in the team is obviously very well aware of anyone that's had a concussion, and then obviously rugby itself has head case, return to play. So you've got the different stages where symptoms, etc., would trigger you reverting back to step 1 and starting the whole process again. So if you're sensible, you follow the process and you're honest with how you're feeling within yourself and your body, then when you do get to that return to play point, you'll be fine.
Yeah. And then with the more modern gum shields that there are being made to sense the head collisions, how important are they going to be, do you think, for the future, trying to avoid these head injuries or make them be less long-lasting almost?
I think any tech in anything is probably an improvement, and it probably just helps. They talk a lot about the minor concussions and the sort of the mini ones, don't they, at the top level of the game, which obviously they're playing a faster, harder game than us. But if it trickles down and, someone that's playing rugby week in, week out at an amateur level, and they accumulate, enough smaller blows to the head that is, you probably need a couple of weeks off, then it can only be a good thing, can't it, for someone's long-term health.
And then in terms of when you had the concussions, how did you find people around you reacting to the idea of you coming back? Did they all seem quite strong against it, or were they all really supportive towards you returning again?
No, everyone's supportive. Again, it goes back to the, making sure you're ready, you've ticked off all the steps in the return to play, and then everyone's mindful in training. Obviously you train before you go back to a match, contact, build back up to it. Has anyone lost any confidence, technique, etc. They're nervous about it. So just as a collective, as coaches, we're keeping an eye on it. If someone's had a head blow, I think you'd be nervous about tackling again or anything like that. And is that something you need to build back up? But generally, everyone's fairly supportive of it, yeah.
And did you find yourself trying to change any kind of way that you were playing in a game? Or like in training afterwards, after you'd had it, just try and be safer or be a bit more precautious?
Personally, no. But like I say, I played a lot of my adult life, and I played some at juniors, so sort of generally you know how to tackle, you know how to do all the basics, and you kind of know in yourself probably what caused it. Got your head the wrong side, bit of poor technique, etc. So you kind of do a bit of self-analysis really, and you can build on it. For those that are less experienced, definitely someone's seen it from the sideline. You can, there's always coaching pointers for everyone, but it just gives you something to help build and develop that player further with as well. So as much as it wasn't great, there's learnings that can be taken from it, and you can make them a better player from it as well.
Yeah. And when you hear the news of these head injuries for the professional players, does that ever make you question almost how likely is it to happen in your game in a way? How likely are you to get the same kind of injury based off of the same play, or do you always...
Not really, no. I'd say the amount of Tuesday night training and a game a Saturday, 2 or 3 a month, say the intensity and the level and the quantum of play and head knocks is just way less, isn't it? Yeah. They're playing at an intensity and a pace on a Saturday or a Sunday that's way above anything we do. Those blows to the head are massive, and then also they're doing all the training during the week as well. They're paid to do it every day of the week almost, aren't they? So their risk and the amount that they're exposed to it is way higher than we'd ever be exposed to.
And then is there like a certain kind of game or a certain way a team's playing that you feel like stands out as the most common one that a player will get a head injury at?
I wouldn't say so. I think it's always unique, a situation, and it can be the most mundane thing. Someone's just on the floor and in a ruck and someone's just caught a knee, or it could be someone's tackling someone who's made a break. You can't attribute that to sort of any, type of game. Just because you've got someone big and lumpy running at you, if you put the proper technique in and put your head the right side, you're not going to, your head's out of the way. You could have the boniest person running at you in the world, and if you get your head the wrong side and you catch a knee, then you're increasing your chances of suffering a concussion.
And then I just want to ask, is it more, do you think, if you make the tackle you're likely to get the concussion, or is it also actually if you get tackled, do you think you might you stand a chance of getting the concussion?
I'd be interested to see the stats actually on the tackler or tacklee being highest. There's a risk with everything, isn't there? I mean, your tackler, yes, you're potentially putting yourself your head in a compromised position, but again, that's technique and training and making sure you put your head in the right place. And then equally as the tackled, there's a way to brace yourself and fall down, and especially as the ground gets harder as the summer approaches and the end of the season, if you bang your head off a hard ground, if you've not quite done that properly, you've potentially got a risk as well, haven't you? So I wouldn't personally say it's one or the other. I think just proper technique and understanding kind of mitigates it on both sides.
And just back to when you actually had the second concussion that wasn't from the being knocked out.
Yeah.
How did each day almost feel for you? How long did it take you to start to feel the effects going again?
A few years ago now. I'd say probably the one where I didn't get knocked out, that was probably a minor one. Just, usual, you just feel a bit groggy, don't you, for a few days, and then sort of feel all right, follow the process, start the light exercise, return to play. And generally didn't feel, not too bad with that one, to be fair.
And you said how you could start to pick out for yourself when you felt like you might have one, and it's very obvious to you. Can you also notice it for other players when you think they might have one, or is it just a personal notice? No,
you can definitely notice. I mean, if you're playing and someone else has had one, you might not be, because you're obviously so invested in the game and aware. But if you're on the sidelines, you can definitely tell, because generally if someone has had a concussion, obviously the obvious looks of out of it, staggering, stumbling, not moving as quick and freely as they normally would. You just get all the symptoms and list them off. So I'd say, if you're invested in the game, you'd probably struggle to see it unless it's happened right in front of you. But on the sidelines, you can definitely identify it.
Well, I can't think of any other questions.
No problem.
So thank you very much for that.
No problem.